some folks out with some family things, and I do know we have one senator on WebEx joining us. So, committee, we're going to open up today with a hearing on House Bill 2101. We'll begin with an overview from our reviser, David Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. House Bill 2101 prohibits municipalities from implementing a guaranteed income program. This would be a new section of law that prohibits a city or county from adopting an ordinance or resolution that would establish or provide for the operation of a guaranteed income program that uses tax revenue unless the legislature expressly consents to and approves of such program by an act of the legislature. Any ordinance or resolution currently in effect prior to the effective date of the bill would be declared null and void. The subsection C of the bill defines guaranteed income program as a program that is not expressly required by federal law or regulation and provides individuals with a regular periodic cash payment. There was a House floor amendment to 2101 that did change that definition of guaranteed income program to that definition, and then also provided that the prohibition applies to programs that use tax revenue unless the legislature expressly consents to the program. The effective date of the bill would be July 1, 2025, and the House did pass 2101 February 20th by a vote of 86 to 37. And I can stand for any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move on to proponent testimony. We have Stephen Green, Opportunity Solutions Project. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Erickson. I apologize for the typo in my testimony, and members of the committee. My name is Steve Green. I'm here to testify in support on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project in favor of 2101. You have the testimony before you. The bill's rather straightforward. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that it does, sort of talk globally or specifically about the bill, but also globally about guaranteed income programs, universal basic income, that it's also referred to as. So it's important to note that this bill doesn't prohibit cities outright from being able to participate in guaranteed income programs or universal basic income. It was amended on the House floor to, if it's tax revenue, specifically that the legislative body has to approve these types of programs, and it's related to ordinances or city-county resolutions that would enforce these types of assistance programs. It's important to understand, I think, this guaranteed basic income program is different than other cash assistance programs. If you think about TANF, for example, there's work requirements or work-related requirements. Guaranteed basic income or universal basic income is just straight assistance or cash assistance without any sort of work-related activity tied to it. It's, let's say, just if you meet a certain income threshold, it's $500 a month or $1,000 a month. It just depends. Different cities have sort of had different models for how this program has been operated. The only state that I know of that has done it sort of whole scale is the state of California. You see this a lot in cities themselves. There's about 150 at least that are participating in some form of a universal basic income program. Places near to the state of Kansas, Des Moines, Iowa, and then also St. Louis, Missouri, have instituted some form of universal basic income. And so the other thing that it's important to note, this would not prevent a sort of a private partnership with a public entity. So if the United Way or a faith-based organization wanted to provide some sort of cash assistance on their own, that wouldn't prohibit that type of activity or assistance. It's really just limited to tax receipts or taxes being used to fund universal basic income program. Just sort of globally, there's been a lot of studies. This has been something that's been growing in popularity, like I've noted, and with that in time, there are studies that are showing that this isn't having the positive impact that maybe it was suggested that it could achieve. There was two studies that I was able to find that were issued last year. The first is, does income affect health? Evidence from a randomized controlled trial or guaranteed income. What that study showed that at the first year that recipients of UBI may have experienced sort of moderate or marginal impact in health outcomes, but after the second and third year, those had either leveled off or they'd actually had decreased compared to the control group, the ones that didn't receive universal basic income. And then another study, and I'll provide this to the committee later. I don't have it in my testimony, showed that actually work participation rates decreased over time with those that were participating in universal basic income. So the last question, is this happening in Kansas? There is no city right now that is actively doing this. We do know that Douglas County and the city of Lawrence has it's called the Douglas County Community Health Plan, and in their 5-year plan, one of the outcomes or one of the goals is to participate in a guaranteed basic income program. So while this isn't something that is happening at this very moment in a city, that from my research that I can find, it is something that they are planning to do or building momentum to do. We think this is banning or at least giving the legislature approval to do something like this is important, and that's why it's before you today. We think it's good policy. Happy to answer any questions for the committee. Thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. A committee, that is our proponent. Testimony, questions. Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Steve, for being here. So I've read your testimony and obviously listened as you were talking. This isn't happening in Kansas, I believe you indicated. So can you please tell me what problem we're trying to solve here?
Yeah. Madam Chair, if I may, and I think that's a reasonable and fair question. It is, so this came out of just in preparation, seeing Lawrence, so that, again, that, and I'll send you the Douglas County Community Health Plan. It's like the health plan for 2025 through 2029 that's made in concert with different stakeholders. In it, they do say that they express the plan or a commitment to providing a guaranteed basic income program within the next 2 to 3 years. I think it's on page 11 or 12 of the plan, but I'll send that to the committee. So I think we are seeing it gain in popularity, and as it gains nationally, we're seeing cities like Lawrence getting ready to try to implement some sort of pilot program like that.
Doesn't that infringe on local control, though?
Madam Chair, if I may, that is a question that has been brought up by opponents. I know that when it comes to tax policy, that the legislature and just general policy, it's something that you all get to consider. I'm not a constitutional scholar, and so I'll let people much smarter than me answer that question. I would disagree that it's sort of what's good for a statewide policy is good for a city. So, but I'll let you all decide that as a committee.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. So you did mention about the fact that like say United Way or some church organization, whatever like that, could do this. Is also would prohibit like a matching fund kind of a thing as well.
Madam Chair, Senator, as long as there's not so the way it was amended, and in my understanding, as long as it wasn't using any form of tax dollars. So if as soon as it uses tax dollars, it would be prohibited, or at least the legislature would have to approve. But if it was some sort of, other fund that I can't necessarily think of off the top of my head, that would be potentially allowable.
Yeah, I can't think of any dollars that government entities have that's not tax dollars. So thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Green, so the House amended this to add that provision with legislative approval. I guess I would be correct in understanding that you introduced it without that provision. It'd be a strict prohibition. Would you speak to the reasons why strict prohibition may or may not be better than having a legislative sign-off?
Madam Chair, if I may, I think so. They looked sort of, as I understood it, they kind of a couple things in the spirit of negotiation and wanting to have policy that more people can support than oppose. I think there was just a general hesitancy to do an outright ban altogether because there's this connection to appropriating money and using tax dollars that they thought was within the purview of the legislature. We've frankly seen across different states. I know Arkansas, this bill now as amended follows sort of the Arkansas model. Both are good pieces of legislation. So from our perspective, you sometimes have the sort of stronger position, but also understand the legislative process, and we still support the bill as amended.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to opponent testimony. I believe that this is written only. And we have from Spencer Duncan, Jay Hall, and Dustin Hare. Although I do know we do have a person available for any questions that anyone may have for the opponents after looking through testimony. Are there any questions? Senator Holscher, and I believe it is John Goodyear, is available to answer any opponent questions. So, welcome to committee.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I guess my question is the same for you as it was for the proponent. What problem is being solved with this, and is this legislation needed?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Again, my name is John Goodyear, General Counsel for the League of Kansas Municipalities. Thank you for letting me come up and address the question. We would certainly argue no. As the proponent said, while there are 150 or so cities that are doing this, there are none currently in Kansas. And while it's been discussed, I don't know that it's gained much traction within the city of Lawrence, within Douglas County. It's an aspirational goal, but we all know aspirational goals don't necessarily indicate where legislation's going. But so I would argue that at this time, something like this is not needed. And at any time, if it were to come forward, it'd be an unnecessary limit on local control. These local leaders are elected to make these decisions at the local level. Thank you.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The conversation around local control, I think, is always an interesting one, especially when we know that the state provides funding and subsidizes cities and other entities quite a bit. Would the state not have a vested interest if a local entity is choosing to use taxpayer funds to provide universal basic income or something along those lines, and now the state is suddenly participating in that, even if indirectly through subsidization and support of other programs? Does the state not have a vested interest in looking after state taxpayer dollars as well?
So, Senator Shane, and thank you for the question. Typically, when funds funnel down through the state, those are apportioned for a specific purpose, and they have to be used for that specific purpose. What we're talking about here is going to be dollars that are coming in from other income sources that a city could determine universal basic income or a basic income program or a tax rebate program, which would be funded by tax funds, is the right thing for their community.
Yeah, I guess my question kind of centers around it's all comes from the same finite pool of money. And so if a city is choosing to use some of its finite pool to pull into this program and then is also seeking state support on other programs where they're spending money that could have otherwise been spent on alternative program, said alternative program, it's still pulling from the same pool. So I guess it's, in effect, I kind of view the state as, by kind of through that effect, creating the ability to create the program in the first place. Does that make sense?
Sure, I understand that position, Senator Shane. I would just counter with local decision makers are elected to make decisions at the local level to utilize their local funds in whatever way. And when we work with the state government or federal government to get additional funds to fund specific programs, it's acknowledgement of that partnership. It's dual constituencies. Just because dollars are funneling into a specific city, that city is within the state. So it's money coming down from the state to support that city, but it is supporting the state as a whole. So it's just how we want to frame the thought process, I suppose, Senator.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I don't guess I really have a question, just have a kind of a comment. I know there's a lot of charities will say, well, you can earmark where you want that money to go that you're giving. But does that not free up, as Senator Shane was mentioning, that just frees up funds for other things? So I guess when we talk about local control, if you want local control, you raise all your money locally. And if you get your money from outside, then there needs to be some those people that are funding that need to have some say. That's my comment.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for being
Thank you,
willing to
Senator.
take questions. Committee, we have no neutral testimony, so we will close the hearing on House Bill 2101 and open the hearing on House Bill 2304 with a staff overview by our reviser, David Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2304 would require local governments to report certain local economic development incentive program information to the Secretary of Commerce, and the Secretary would be required to post such information on a database maintained by the Secretary. So Section 1 amends KSA 7450.com226 to add certain local government-based incentive development programs or incentives to the definition of economic development incentive program, and also includes a definition of local government, and then also a definition for that searchable website or web page. The bill also requires recipients of incentives to be identified by the business name filed with the Secretary of State, and if the recipient is an enterprise created primarily for the purpose of that economic development project, it shall include the enterprise partners or principals that own or have a controlling interest in the recipient. Section 2 amends KSA 74-50-COM227. This would require the Department of Commerce to collect incentive data from local governments and place that data on a searchable website or web page that's comprehensive of all information for all years and shall permit searching by a user, by the program, the county, and the recipient. The database shall have an easily accessible drop-down menu to allow searching by keyword or phrase, and the search results shall include all information required by this section in one printable or downloadable report. The database shall also be configured to provide summary reports when requested by the user of the database. This section also provides that when local governments provide information to the Department of Commerce on local economic development incentive programs on and after July 1, 2025, any recipient of more than $50,000 in annual incentives shall, as a condition of the award, agree to provide the information required by this section for publication on the department's database. There were several House Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development amendments to 2304 that would require the database be capable of calculating total incentives for each category claimed by year and be searchable by year. Added some additional detail for that summary report concerning the number of years the incentive may be claimed, total unencumbered incentive award that may be claimed, and the total incentives that have been claimed by recipient per year. These summary reports would also be provided to the House and Senate Commerce Committees on or before January 31 of each year, and shall disclose the most recent 3 years of incentives claimed and the total amount of funds claimed by the state or local government that are required to be paid over the entire period of the economic development incentive. The House Committee also amended the bill to provide that all information shall be provided in the form and manner as required by the Secretary, and also provided a time frame for some of those local government-based incentive development programs that are being added to the statute. So when that information will need to be reported on the database. Finally, the committee amended the bill to allow the Secretary to impose an administrative fee of 1% of the amount of the total incentive not to exceed $1,000 upon each recipient of an economic development program, economic development incentive program administered by the Secretary for the purpose of paying any costs incurred for the administration and maintaining of the database. The House did pass 2304 by a vote of 97 to 26, and I can take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you. We will move on, committee, to proponent testimony. We have Representative Christy Williams. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. And so just some brief context. This bill and this whole concept began in 2017. It took a couple years to get it to pass the line, and it was the Senate and the House Commerce that did take it across the line and to put all kinds of qualifications relating to it, relating to transparency. Let's move forward to 2019. When it passes, we are now in 2025, and what we found, there were still many gaping holes in the transparency database. And so I would be able to go to the transparency database and I would just find empty lines where there was nothing there. There were no totals there. So we talked to Department of Commerce and they made some improvements, but ultimately we actually requested a legislative post audit, and the audit did find that it wasn't completely in compliance with statute. In addition, we found that beyond those non-compliances, there were actually some things that we still didn't know, information we still didn't have. And one of that would be the layering effect of local government spending. Oftentimes when we're passing incentives here, whether it's star bonds or tax credits or payroll deductions, we have no idea what that potential recipient might be receiving at the local level. So we are now requiring that. Now, I want to back up just a step from that and just let you know that industrial revenue bonds, those types of things, those were required initially and just recently were updated and included in the website. So I think a couple things have happened. Number one, the law was good, but it took 5 years for it to be 80% implemented. Now we need to go the next step and be ensured that they incorporate all the aspects that we have placed into the statute. So real quick, I'll just talk about some of those changes to statute and why those are there. We added the searchable year date. Right now, if you go to the website, you will be able to search it, and I highly encourage you to go to the website. It's on Commerce's website. It's on the right-hand side. You pull down the tab, and you can find the transparency database. When you open that transparency database, you should be able to search by program, so that's any program that actually provides more than $50,000 of incentives. And that has to be a non-social type of or domestic tax credit. All right, so it does not include sales tax exemptions. They are commerce programs that have credits. Generally, that's the bulk of it. You can also search by your county. I think that's very important. And you can also search by recipient. It's not 100%. Right now, but hopefully they will get there. We added year because what I found is you could download, for example, a particular program like HPIP, which in my testimony, I share that between 2017 and 2020, they actually had about $3 billion of encumbered credits that could go forward. That's a lot of money, and we don't even understand what that is. But you couldn't search for it by year. And so I want to make sure that you can search for it by year and you can sort by year. Another thing that we added, it would be the totals. If you go on the website right now, you're going to have to calculate those totals. You're going to have to put it in an Excel sheet, and you're going to have to do the summation yourself. You're going to have to sort by the year and do the totals. And so that is something that the website will now have to provide, totals by year. And it's not just the amount claimed by year, but it's also the amount that can be claimed over the course of its time frame. So for example, HPIP. HPIP is available for tax credits for 16 years. It's transferable for 7. So what's the lifetime cost of that tax credit? Let me give you another example of a program that we have. We have the LIHTC, that's the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. That tax credit was just recently in a bill repealed, or actually 85 Republicans and I don't know how many Democrats voted to kill that type of tax incentive. Why? Because when we voted on it in 2022, it said we were going to give 25 million, but then it compounds the next year. We're going to give a new 25 plus the old 25, and it goes for 10 years. So at the end of that program, that's $250 million of state tax credits given away every single year forever. On top of that, it also includes the same for the federal government. Did anyone realize that we had given that kind of money away? And if you add that on top of what Commerce has shared with me, I don't know if it's accurate, they said in the years 2022, we gave a total of $464 million in incentives. That doesn't include the one I just mentioned because it didn't start until 2022. So I estimate that we are giving about $1 billion away a year. And that has a fiscal impact. The only way we're going to be able to get our budget in check, spending, and we're going to have to stop the giveaways. Because I'm pretty sure all of our constituents can invest that money, can save that money, can spend that money, and that will also provide an economic benefit. So I just want full transparency, and we're getting there, but we're not quite. And with the passage of this bill, we get one step closer to more accountability. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, what questions do we have? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move on to opponent testimony, and we have Michael Koss, City Attorney from the City of Overland Park. Welcome to committee. Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. It's always kind of awkward to be providing opponent testimony when you only oppose one small subsection of the bill, but that is why I'm here today. If you look on page 2, line 22, one of the items that local governments are required to report includes any grant, loan, lease, land acquisition, site prep, utilities, facilities, streets or roadways, workforce development, workforce training, or any other incentive offered by a local government accepted by a recipient. And it's important to note 2 qualifications related to that. It's only if that program has a value of over $50,000, so that's going to narrow that list somewhat. It's also if it's to a recipient. And so I went throughout the exercise, what would Overland Park have to submit each year? And I realized we don't do many of these things as part of our economic development programs, but I think it captures some unintended activities. For example, we give about $1 million in special alcohol funds to nonprofits to fight substance abuse, similar with opioid settlement funds. And those are programs that are over $50,000 that go to an enterprise, because an enterprise, the definition of it includes nonprofits. I also thought that our CDBG funding that's given to us by the federal government, we distribute that in a way that would probably qualify as reporting. We also are required by state law to allow certain telecommunications companies to co-locate on our light poles. And I thought that might have to be a reportable event. And the reason I bring those up, because I don't think that's the intent of this legislation, to muddy up this portal with those activities. And I think that if this language was worked on to maybe tighten up the definition of when these are used as part of a true economic development program, that would maybe avoid some of these unintended consequences. So I would just respectfully request that maybe you look at that language a little bit more. One other unintended consequence I was thinking about this morning, we often get open records requests for CIDs that are generated, and the project itself only has one retailer within that district, and there is a state law that says that we're not allowed to disclose CID revenues for one business because it's in order to protect that business so that you can't look at the CID or TD revenue and then use that to sort of reverse engineer the sales they generated from that district. And there's no reference to those confidentiality provisions within the CID and the TDD Act preventing us from disclosing that information to this portal. So I think that might be a good thing to reference here as well, so that we are not circumventing the confidentiality requirements in another statute by requiring that information to be disclosed here. And then lastly, I would just note, we have a 30-day window where we're required to report a lot of information to this portal after a development agreement is executed. That's sometimes a complex procedure, especially since that includes us reporting all the corporate entities that are involved in these projects, which are oftentimes very complex, include tenancies and commons that own a certain percentage, partnerships for another. If you would be willing to maybe give us some more time, 60, even 45 days, I think that would make that turnaround timeframe more manageable for local governments. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Committee, what questions do we have? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Koss, on that, I fully appreciate there's some really complex business arrangements and business structures out there. Wouldn't you know all of that prior to the execution of the contract for the program?
Prior to, we would, but oftentimes when a deal is signed, you'll see collateral assignments related to getting the private financing secured. Sometimes the way the enterprise is defined to include partners, and I'm sorry, I don't have the definition right in front of me, but the way I read it was that it's not just that corporate entity that we're going to have to list. It's some of those trickle-down entities that make up the corporate entity that signed the document that we're going to find out. And we don't have any power in this statute to compel that developer to give us that information, which I think would also be a good change. But I did see that as maybe an issue with turning that around in 30 days, because we're kind of reliant on that development partner to give us that info if anything changes after the deal's inked.
And that's after, okay, after the deal is inked. Okay, well, I would be interested in hearing what you think those changes would be if you think there's opportunities for increased transparency for the actual applicants and recipients to disclose kind of the nature of their business, and so we fully understand who's actually receiving those programs. So thank you for your testimony.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for the opponent? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. My question is this. Are you able to think of fiscal effect to the local level? It looks like from the fiscal note here, it's 2 FTE. But, you know, I'm thinking about how much of a process this sounds like it might be. And like I said, if there would be a fiscal effect on the local level.
I think the reporting work is certainly an unfunded mandate, but the House made some changes on giving the delayed effective date that was really beneficial to us. It's going to let us look at how we process these internally and hopefully get our applications amended in a way where we're getting, to Senator Shane's point, more of that information up front. So I mean, it will require additional work, but I think with a big organization like ours, we're able to manage that. I can't speak for smaller municipalities.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here and for your testimony. I will draw committee's attention to written neutral only from Spencer Duncan, Government Affairs, League of Kansas Municipalities, and Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs from the Kansas Department of Commerce. Yeah, it is neutral, yes. Seeing no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.